Lonely Cowboys, Lost Dog returns, leading Apache widow. Wild West heroic rescue. The sun rose slowly over the small town of Red Rock, casting long golden shadows across the dusty streets. The wooden buildings, weathered from years of wind and rain, seemed to glow in the early morning light. At the edge of town, on a gentle hill overlooking the vast plains, sat a lone cowboy named Jack Lawson. His hat was pulled low over his eyes, and his leather jacket was worn and creased, showing the many years he had spent on the trail. His horse, a chestnut mare named Daisy, grazed quietly nearby, but Jack's thoughts were far away. He was a man who had known both loss and solitude. Many years ago, he had a family he loved dearly, but fate had taken them from him, leaving him alone in the wide, empty West. Since then, he had traveled from town to town, earning a living with small jobs, helping those who needed it, and moving on before anyone could grow too close. Even though he lived a quiet, solitary life, he was never completely alone. He had Rusty, a small brown and white dog with a brave heart and a sharp mind. Rusty had been with him for years, always loyal, always knowing when Jack was feeling lonely or troubled. That morning, however, something was wrong. Rusty was missing. Jack's voice echoed across the hill as he called, "Rusty! Here, boy!" But there was no response. His heart sank with worry. Rusty would never wander off without reason. Jack hurried down the slope, boots kicking up clouds of dust, searching the town and its outskirts. He asked the townspeople if they had seen his dog, but no one had. A few suggested that Rusty might have gone hunting rabbits or exploring nearby hills, but Jack knew his dog too well. Rusty never strayed far without warning. Determined, Jack set off across the plains. The wind whipped at his jacket, carrying the dry scent of sagebrush and dirt. He walked for miles, scanning the horizon, calling Rusty's name. His eyes narrowed as he spotted movement near a cluster of rocks. There in the shade of the rocks was Rusty, but he was not alone. A woman stood near the dog, her dark hair neatly braided, her clothes simple but sturdy. She moved with quiet confidence, and her eyes, though soft, carried the strength of someone who had survived hardship. Rusty barked happily and ran to her, circling her legs with excitement. The woman laughed softly, bending down to pet him, her smile warm but tinged with sadness. Jack slowed as he approached, careful not to startle either Rusty or the woman. As he got closer, he noticed that she carried a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Her posture was protective, and her eyes held a quiet wariness. Jack realized she was an Apache widow, a woman who had faced great loss yet still carried herself with dignity and courage. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Rusty ran around her, barking joyfully, and she chuckled. Then she spoke, her voice calm but steady. "He found me," she said, gesturing to Rusty. "I think he knew I needed help, and that you would want to know I was safe." Jack dismounted, relief washing over him. "I'm glad he found you," he said. "Rusty is smart, but I didn't know he could do something like this." The woman's eyes softened as she looked at him. "He's brave," she said. "The land is not easy. Alone, it can be dangerous. I've been traveling, and the plains are unforgiving for someone without help." Jack felt a deep respect for her. He had seen the harshness of the wild himself, but he knew that living alone in these open lands required a courage beyond ordinary measure. He offered his hand. "I can help you," he said simply. "If you need someone to guide you or to watch your back, I'll do it." She was proud, used to relying on herself. But she also understood the truth. Sometimes even the strongest must accept help. Slowly, she nodded. "I will trust you," she said, "but we must be careful. There are people who are not kind." Together, they began walking back toward Red Rock. Rusty ran ahead, barking and leaping in excitement. As they walked, Jack and the woman talked quietly, sharing small details of their lives. He learned her name was Ayana, which meant eternal blossom. She told him that after losing her husband, she had wandered through the plains seeking safety and a place to live in peace. Rusty had found her at just the right moment, bringing her to safety. As they reached the town, townspeople began to notice them. Some whispered in surprise at seeing the Apache widow walking alongside Jack Lawson, the lone cowboy. But Jack ignored the gossip. He knew that real trust and friendship were built in moments of danger, not in words or rumors. That evening, they found shelter in a small cabin on the outskirts of Red Rock. Jack built a fire in the hearth, and Rusty curled up beside him, tired but happy. Ayanna sat near the flames, quiet but thoughtful, her face lit by the soft glow. Jack brought her a cup of water and some bread, simple comforts that brought warmth after a long day. As the night grew darker, Jack felt a quiet hope stirring inside him. Life had a strange way of bringing people together. Rusty, the small but fearless dog, had not only returned to him but had guided him to someone who needed his help, someone brave and strong. And Ayanna, wandering alone through a harsh land, had found safety for the night in the company of a man who had known loneliness and loss. The wind whispered outside the cabin, and the stars shone over the vast plains. Jack looked at Ayanna, and she returned his gaze. Neither needed words. They both understood that this meeting was more than chance. It was the beginning of a journey, one that would test their courage, their hearts, and their determination to survive the Wild West together. Rusty lay peacefully between them, unaware of the heroism he had inspired, but content in the love and trust he had earned. The lonely cowboy was no longer truly alone, and the Apache widow, who had once wandered the plains searching for safety, had found a place of warmth, trust, and companionship. The night passed slowly but peacefully. For the first time in many years, Jack felt the comfort of connection. The Wild West was still a place of danger and uncertainty, but with Rusty by his side and Ayanna trusting him, he felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. In this quiet moment, amidst the firelight and the stars, hope had returned to the plains. And sometimes, hope came not from grand deeds, but from the smallest of heroes. A loyal dog, a brave widow, and a cowboy willing to open his heart again. The next morning the sun rose over Red Rock, painting the town in warm orange and gold. The air smelled of dust, dry grass, and a hint of smoke from the small chimneys in the town. Jack awoke early, as he always did, listening to the quiet sounds of the plains. Rusty was already awake, wagging his tail, sniffing around the cabin, and occasionally letting out a cheerful bark. Ayanna was still sleeping, the first rays of sunlight touching her peaceful face. Jack stepped outside to check on Daisy, his mare, who was tied to a post near the cabin. The wind was soft this morning, carrying a cool freshness across the open plains. As he patted Daisy's neck, Jack thought about the journey ahead. The plains were beautiful, but they were also dangerous. Wild animals roamed freely, outlaws could appear at any moment, and the weather could change suddenly, turning a peaceful morning into a fierce storm. He knew that traveling with someone who had never crossed the plains could be risky, but he also felt a sense of responsibility toward Ayanna. Rusty had led him to her, and now it was his duty to ensure she stayed safe. When Ayanna woke, she stretched and rubbed her eyes, looking out at the plains. Jack handed her a small bundle of breakfast, bread, some dried meat, and a few pieces of fruit he had bought in town. She accepted it with a quiet nod, and together they ate in silence, listening to Rusty scampering around. Once breakfast was finished, Jack explained their plan. "We need to move carefully," he said. "There are trails that are safer than others, and I'll show you how to read the land, where water is, where to find shelter, and how to stay hidden if danger comes." Though she had spent years surviving alone, she respected Jack's experience. "I have walked the plains before," she said softly, "but I will follow your guidance." "Together, we will be stronger." With that, they set out. The plains stretched endlessly before them, golden and green under the bright sun. Rusty ran ahead, darting between patches of grass and rocks, always returning to check on them. Jack led the way, scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. Ayanna followed, careful with each step, learning quickly how to move quietly and observe the land. As they traveled, Jack shared stories of his past adventures. He spoke of storms that had nearly swept him away, of outlaws who had tried to rob him, and of nights spent under the stars with only Rusty for company. Ayanna, in turn, shared small pieces of her life, tales of her husband, the life they had shared, and the hardship she had faced alone. The conversation was gentle and steady, like a calm river, bringing them closer as they walked together. Around midday, they came to a narrow stream, the water sparkling under the sun. Jack knelt and drank deeply, then gestured for Ayanna to do the same. Rusty splashed happily in the shallow water, barking at the small fish that swam near the edge. After resting and refilling their canteens, they continued, following the winding path that led through tall grasses and scattered rock formations. As the afternoon grew hotter, the plains seemed to stretch forever. The sun beat down on them and the wind carried small clouds of dust. Jack kept a careful eye on their surroundings. "We're not alone out here," he said, his voice low but firm. "There are others who roam the land. Some mean no harm, but some, we must be ready for anything." Ayanna nodded. She understood the unspoken warning. Though she had survived on her own, she knew that dangers could come in many forms: wild animals, sudden storms, or men with bad intentions. She trusted Jack to guide her safely through the plains, just as he trusted her courage and strength to stay close and alert. As the sun began to lower in the sky, they found a sheltered spot near a group of large rocks and a small grove of trees. It was a perfect place to rest for the night, hidden from the main trail and offering protection from wind and wildlife. Jack set up a small fire, careful to keep it low so it would not be visible from a distance. Rusty curled up beside him, while Ayanna sat quietly, observing the surrounding land. "Tomorrow," Jack said, "we continue further into the plains. There is a valley not far from here where the land is safer and water is plentiful. We can rest there and plan the next stage of our journey." Ayanna nodded. She felt a quiet sense of relief, knowing that they had a plan and that Jack had experience navigating the wild. She also felt a spark of hope. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel completely alone in the dangerous expanse of the West. That night, under a sky full of stars, Jack and Ayanna shared stories around the fire. Rusty lay between them, his small chest rising and falling with each calm breath. The fire crackled, and the wind whispered through the trees, carrying a sense of peace over the plains. Jack spoke of the importance of trust, of understanding one's surroundings, and of relying on courage when danger appeared. Ayanna listened intently, feeling that wisdom settle within her. Suddenly, Rusty barked sharply, alerting them to movement nearby. Jack grabbed his rifle, his eyes scanning the darkness. Ayanna followed his lead, tense but ready. From the shadows emerged a small band of travelers, not hostile, but clearly cautious. Jack and Ayanna stayed still, letting them approach. The travelers, seeing that Jack meant no harm, relaxed slightly and called out greetings. Jack and Ayanna introduced themselves and learned that the travelers had been moving west, searching for safe routes and water sources. Death to the turncoat. They exchanged information, sharing maps and advice. The encounter reminded both Jack and Ayanna that even in the wild, there were others who could be allies if approached carefully. Rusty sniffed each newcomer but remained calm, sensing no danger. By the time the travelers moved on, the night was deep and quiet once more. Jack and Ayanna returned to their small fire, feeling a little safer knowing they were not entirely alone in the vastness of the plains. They spoke briefly of the day's events, making notes of what they had learned and what they needed to watch for in the coming days. As they settled for sleep, Ayanna felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had faced loss and hardship, wandered the plains alone, and wondered if anyone would ever truly understand her. Now, beside this quiet, brave cowboy and a small, loyal dog, she felt a connection that was comforting and steady. She realized that courage was not just facing danger alone. It was having someone by your side who understood, who shared the burden and the hope.
Jack, watching the fire die down, felt the same sense of quiet satisfaction.
For years, he had traveled alone, facing the challenges of the West with only Rusty to keep him company. Now, he had someone to share the journey with, someone who had courage, wisdom, and the resilience to survive in a harsh world. And Rusty, the small hero who had brought them together, lay between them peacefully, as if knowing the world was a little safer tonight. The night passed without incident, and when dawn came, the plains were bathed in golden light once more. Jack, Ayanna, and Rusty prepared to continue their journey, each step filled with purpose. The land ahead was vast and wild, full of unknown challenges, but together they were stronger. Each of them had a role, Jack with his experience, Ayanna with her courage, and Rusty with his loyalty and intuition. The next leg of the journey would test them further. There would be steep hills, unpredictable weather, and moments where danger could appear without warning. But for now, as they walked into the bright morning, there was hope, trust, and the quiet excitement of adventure. The lonely cowboy was no longer truly alone. The Apache widow had found a companion and protector, and a small dog had reminded them both of the power of loyalty, courage, and connection. And so, with the plains stretching endlessly before them, they moved forward together, ready to face the Wild West, trusting one another and embracing the adventure that awaited. The journey had only just begun, but already they felt that something extraordinary was unfolding. Guided by bravery, kindness, and the unspoken bond of three unlikely heroes, the sun rose slowly over the plains, painting the land in shades of gold and orange. Jack, Ayanna, and Rusty had already begun walking, the rhythm of their journey steady but careful. The previous day's rest had given them energy, but the vastness of the open plains reminded them that the West was a place that demanded respect. Every hill, every rocky outcrop, every distant shadow could hide danger, and Jack knew that they needed to remain alert at all times. As they moved, Jack led them along a narrow trail that wound between rocky cliffs. The path was uneven and treacherous, but he had traveled it before and knew its secret turns and hidden dangers. Rusty darted ahead, sniffing at the ground and signaling when something unusual appeared. Ayanna followed closely, careful with each step, learning to match Jack's pace and awareness. She had grown more confident in just a few days, her natural courage shining through as she adapted to the harsh environment. By midday, the sun was high and the heat intense. Jack found a small, shaded spot beside a cluster of rocks where they could rest. He led Daisy to water from a hidden stream, and Rusty drank eagerly, splashing with excitement. Ayanna sat on a rock nearby, wiping sweat from her brow, but her eyes were alive with curiosity. "This land tests you in ways you don't expect," Jack said quietly, watching the horizon. "It can be beautiful, but it can also be unforgiving. You need to be ready for anything, storms, animals, even people with bad intentions." Ayanna nodded. She understood. Life alone had taught her to survive, but she had not forgotten the feeling of vulnerability. Now, she was learning that true safety came not just from strength, but from awareness and careful planning. She also felt a growing trust in Jack, who guided her without making her feel helpless. Rusty's presence reminded her that even the smallest companion could make a difference in dangerous moments. After resting and drinking water, they continued along the trail, moving toward a valley Jack knew well. The valley was rich with resources, water, edible plants, and small caves that could provide shelter if needed. But it was also a place where bandits and other dangers could appear, attracted by travelers or livestock. Jack remained vigilant, scanning the hills and distant ridges, listening for sounds carried by the wind. As they descended into the valley, Rusty suddenly barked sharply, running ahead and circling a large bush. Jack signaled for Ayanna to stay back and approached cautiously. Behind the bush, he found a small group of men, not much older than teenagers but with hardened expressions and a look of desperation. They were clearly trying to hide, but their movements were clumsy. Jack stepped forward slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Easy now," he said. "We don't want trouble, but we need to know who you are and what you're doing here." The eldest of the group, a thin boy with a scar on his cheek, spoke nervously. We're just passing through," he said. "We didn't mean any harm. We're looking for food and water." "Please, don't hurt us!" Jack studied them carefully. He could see fear in their eyes, but also a hint of defiance. He realized they were young boys who had been forced by circumstances to survive as best they could. "This land is dangerous," Jack said firmly. "You need to be careful. There are worse people out here than me, and some don't give second chances. Stay on the trails, respect others, and you'll survive." Ayanna watched quietly, noting the tension in Jack's voice and the respect he demanded without raising his hand. She felt a small sense of pride in him. He had faced danger countless times but still showed mercy when it was deserved. Rusty barked again, more gently this time, as if to remind them that the world was not all harshness. The boys nodded quickly, understanding the warning. They backed away slowly, disappearing into the valley without causing any trouble. Jack exhaled, relaxing slightly. "You see," he said to Ayana, "not all dangers are wild animals. Some are people who are scared or desperate. It's not always easy to tell the difference." They continued deeper into the valley, the landscape changing gradually. Small streams branched off from the main water source. Wildflowers grew along the edges, and the hills provided natural shelter from strong winds. Jack pointed out edible plants and berries, teaching Ayana how to recognize which were safe to eat. He also showed her how to find water by observing the plants and the tracks of animals. As afternoon turned to evening, dark clouds began forming in the sky. Jack looked up, his expression serious. "We might have a storm coming," he said. "We need to find shelter before it hits." They moved quickly, following a small path that led to a rocky outcrop. Behind it, a natural cave offered protection. Jack led them inside, securing the entrance with large rocks to shield against wind and rain. Rusty curled up near the entrance, alert but calm, sensing that they were safe for the moment. The storm arrived with sudden intensity. Rain lashed against the rocks, wind howled through the valley, and distant thunder rolled across the plains. Inside the cave, Jack and Ayana huddled near a small fire he had built. They shared a quiet meal, listening to the storm and feeling the rhythm of survival around them. "This is why preparation matters," Jack said softly, watching the rain. "Out here, you never know what's coming. One moment, the land is calm. The next, it can challenge everything you know." Ayana nodded, feeling the truth of his words. She realized that surviving alone had taught her courage, but traveling with someone experienced gave her a sense of safety she had never known. Rusty barked softly at a small sound outside, then settled again, reminding them that even in danger, there was always companionship. As night fell, the storm continued, but inside the cave they felt protected. Jack and Ayana shared stories again, their voices low over the sound of rain. They spoke of past hardships, of moments they had thought they would not survive, and of the small victories that kept them going. They laughed quietly at Rusty's antics, and for a few hours the dangers of the world felt distant. When the storm finally passed, they emerged from the cave to a valley refreshed and washed clean by rain. The air smelled sweet, the streams ran full and clear, and the hills glistened under the soft glow of the moon. Jack looked around, satisfied. "We've made it through this," he said. "The land can test you, but if you stay smart and work together, you can overcome almost anything."
"I'm learning so much," she said, "not just how to survive, but how to trust and work with others."
"This land is harsh, but it can also teach you courage and hope." Jack nodded. "Exactly. And Rusty here," he added, patting the small dog, "reminds us that even the smallest companions can make a big difference." The next morning they continued their journey, moving deeper into the valley with renewed determination. They faced hills, streams, and patches of dense brush, but together they navigated each obstacle. Jack taught Ayana how to read animal tracks, spot signs of other travelers, and find the safest paths through rough terrain. Each step brought them closer, building trust and a sense of partnership that was becoming stronger with every mile. By nightfall, they reached a high ridge overlooking the valley. The view was breathtaking, rolling hills, sparkling streams, and forests that stretched as far as the eye could see. Jack and Ayana stood together, watching the sunset, Rusty at their feet, and felt the quiet triumph of reaching this place safely. It was a reminder that courage, skill, and trust could turn the wildest challenges into achievements. And so the journey continued. The plains of the West were still vast and unpredictable, filled with both beauty and danger. But Jack, Ayana, and Rusty were ready. Each day tested their strength, their courage, and their bond, and each night reminded them of the rewards of survival, trust, and friendship. The adventure was far from over, but they faced it together, stronger than they had ever been before. The morning sun bathed the valley in warm golden light as Jack, Ayana, and Rusty prepared to continue their journey. After the storm the night before, the plains seemed refreshed, but Jack knew that nature was always unpredictable. The paths could be slippery, rivers could rise suddenly, and animals or bandits could appear without warning. He looked at Ayana, who was adjusting her pack and checking her supplies, and felt a quiet sense of pride. She had learned so much in just a few days, becoming stronger and more confident with every step. Rusty bounded ahead, sniffing the ground and darting between rocks. Jack laughed quietly. "Stay close," he called. Rusty barked as if to say he understood, then ran back to check on Ayana. Together, the three of them moved toward the next ridge, the land stretching endlessly before them. As they walked, Jack taught Ayana how to read subtle signs in the land. Broken branches that might indicate an animal passing, footprints that could tell the story of people or creatures who had come before, and the sound of distant birds that could warn of danger. Ayana listened carefully, absorbing every detail. She realized that surviving the plains was not just about strength or courage. It was about observation, patience, and understanding the world around you. Rusty's presence made it easier. The dog's instincts were sharp, and he often alerted them to small movements that Jack or Ayana might have missed. By midday, the sun was high and hot, and the valley below shimmered with heat. They found a shaded grove beside a small stream and paused to rest. Jack handed Ayana a piece of bread and some dried meat, while Rusty drank eagerly from the cool water. The sound of the stream was soothing, but Jack remained alert, scanning the surroundings for anything unusual. "Out here," Jack said quietly. "You have to be ready for surprises." "Not all of them are dangerous, but some can be. You can't afford to let your guard down." Ayana nodded. She understood more than ever that traveling the plains required constant awareness. She had faced hardship before, but now she was learning how to survive with someone she trusted, someone experienced. And she realized that courage was not just facing danger alone, it was about teamwork, about knowing when to rely on others. After their break, they continued their journey, descending toward a narrow canyon that Jack knew could be treacherous. The path was steep, with loose rocks and sharp drops on either side. Jack led carefully, testing each step before moving, while Ayana followed his lead. Rusty, agile and fearless, navigated the rocks easily, always returning to guide them if needed. Suddenly, Rusty barked sharply, stopping in front of a large rock. Jack froze and looked carefully. In the shadow of the rock he saw movement, a group of strangers clearly trying to stay hidden. They were rough-looking men with worn clothes, and some carried weapons. Jack signaled to Ayana to stay back, his hand raised in warning. "These men don't look friendly," Jack whispered. "We need to be careful. Let's see if we can avoid them or at least get a better understanding before we act." The men appeared tense, speaking in low voices, unaware of Jack and Ayana watching from a hidden position. Jack studied their movements, noting their numbers, their weapons, and the way they positioned themselves along the canyon path. He realized that if they wanted to, these men could block the trail and put them in serious danger. Ayana's heart raced, but she stayed calm, trusting Jack's judgment. "What do we do?" she asked quietly. "We wait and observe," Jack replied. "We can't take risks. Rusty will help us if needed. Follow my lead and don't make sudden movements." As they watched, one of the men moved closer to the edge of the canyon, scanning the area. Jack noticed a gap in their formation, a narrow path that could allow them to pass without confrontation. He whispered his plan to Ayana, explaining exactly how they should move, where to step, and when to pause. Rusty barked once, almost as if acknowledging the plan. Carefully, they began their descent, moving quietly along the narrow path. The men were close enough to be dangerous, but far enough away to give them a chance. Ayana followed precisely, her nerves sharp but steady. Rusty ran ahead, scouting the way and returning to ensure they were safe. As they neared the bottom of the canyon, one of the men noticed movement near the rocks. He raised his voice, warning the others. Jack's instincts kicked in. He grabbed a loose branch and tossed it to the side, creating a distraction. Rusty barked and ran toward the noise, drawing the men's attention. "Now!" Jack whispered, and they moved quickly through the gap, pressing against the canyon wall and staying low. The men shouted and ran toward the noise, but it was too late. Jack, Ayanna, and Rusty were already past the dangerous section, moving swiftly into safer terrain. Once they were clear, Jack let out a sigh of relief. "That was close," he said, smiling faintly. "But we made it." "And Rusty, well, he's a hero, as always." Ayanna patted Rusty, grateful for his quick thinking. "He's amazing," she said. "I don't know what we would do without him." The canyon behind them was silent once more, the echoes of shouting fading into the distance. They continued on, following a trail that led toward a hill overlooking the plains. From this vantage point, they could see miles in every direction. Jack pointed out landmarks, small streams, clusters of trees, and rocky outcrops that could provide shelter. "This is where we can plan the next stage," Jack said. "The land ahead is wild and beautiful, but it can be dangerous. We'll need to be smart and ready for anything." Ayanna nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and determination. She had faced fear today and had come through it with courage. She realized that the Wild West, with all its danger and uncertainty, was teaching her not just to survive, but to trust herself and those she traveled with. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the plains, they found a small cave near the top of the hill. It was simple, but offered shelter from the coming night. Jack built a small fire and Rusty curled up close, always keeping watch. Ayanna helped prepare a simple meal, and together they ate, sharing quiet conversation. "That was a day full of challenges," Jack said, breaking the silence. "But we faced them together. That's what matters. Trust, courage, and keeping a clear head." Ayanna smiled, feeling a warm sense of accomplishment. "I've learned so much today," she said. "About the land, about danger, and about relying on others. I feel stronger and not alone." Rusty barked softly, as if agreeing, and Jack chuckled. "You're right, little buddy. We're stronger together." "And tomorrow, we'd keep moving. The plains are vast, but so are the opportunities to learn and survive." That night they lay under the stars, listening to the wind moving through the grass and the distant calls of animals. The quiet reminded them that the West could be both harsh and beautiful. They had faced danger today, and yet they had grown stronger. They knew that the journey ahead would bring more tests, more risks, but also more lessons and triumphs. Jack looked at Ayanna, and she looked back at him. Neither spoke, but both understood that the bond between them had deepened. Rusty, the small but courageous dog who had brought them together and guided them through danger, slept peacefully between them. The plains stretched endlessly before them, full of challenges, mysteries, and opportunities. Jack, Ayanna, and Rusty had proven that courage, trust, and quick thinking could overcome even the most difficult obstacles. And though the next day would bring new dangers, they were ready to face them, stronger together and guided by loyalty, skill, and the bond of shared adventure. The Wild West was unpredictable, but for these three heroes, it was also full of hope, courage, and the promise of what they could achieve together. And so, as the fire crackled and the stars shone overhead, they rested, knowing that tomorrow their journey would continue, bringing new challenges, heroism, and lessons that would shape them forever. The sun rose over the plains, spilling golden light across the land and casting long shadows over the hills. Jack, Ayanna, and Rusty were already awake, preparing for what they knew would be a challenging day. They had traveled far together, faced dangers in the canyon, and survived storms, but Jack could sense that today would test them even more. They packed their few belongings carefully, tying supplies securely to Daisy, Jack's mare, while Rusty darted ahead, alert and eager. The plains stretched endlessly before them, and Jack scanned the horizon, watching for any signs of trouble. Ayanna adjusted her pack, checking that everything was in place. She had learned so much in the past days, how to read tracks, find water, and stay aware of dangers, but she also knew that courage and quick thinking would be just as important. As they moved forward, the air grew warmer, and the wind carried the distant sounds of movement. Jack signaled Ayanna to be quiet, crouching slightly to stay hidden. Rusty barked sharply and ran ahead, sniffing the ground and guiding them toward a narrow trail that led to a small clearing. There, they spotted a group of men surrounding a young traveler who seemed trapped and afraid. Jack's heart tightened. He recognized the danger immediately. These men were not travelers like the group they had encountered before. They were clearly bandits, looking to steal or harm anyone who crossed their path. Rusty growled low in his throat, sensing the threat. Ayanna gripped Jack's arm slightly, feeling the tension in the air. Jack whispered, "Stay calm." "We can help him, but we need a plan. Rusty and Daisy will be our advantage." They watched quietly, analyzing the situation. The young traveler had nowhere to go, cornered by the bandits near a shallow ravine. Jack motioned to Ayanna, explaining that they would create a distraction, giving the traveler a chance to escape. Ayanna nodded, her eyes full of determination. Rusty barked, running in a wide circle to draw the attention of the bandits. The small dog's courage was incredible, but it was exactly what they needed. Jack and Ayanna moved quickly, keeping low and silent. When Rusty barked near the nearest bandit, Jack grabbed a small rock and tossed it to the opposite side of the clearing. The sound drew some of the men away from the traveler, who took the moment to dash toward the safety of the nearby trees. Ayanna moved beside Jack, helping him guide the traveler through the underbrush. The bandits shouted angrily, realizing they had been tricked. Jack and Ayanna ran, keeping the group between them and the clearing. Rusty leapt and barked, keeping the bandits distracted and buying precious seconds. One of the men tried to chase them through the rocks, but Daisy, sensing the urgency, neighed loudly and stomped her hooves, startling him and causing him to stumble. Finally, they reached a safe area, hidden behind a dense grove of trees. The traveler, a young man no older than 16, collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. Jack knelt beside him, checking that he was unharmed. "You're safe now," he said gently. "We've taken care of the danger, at least for now." The traveler's eyes were wide with gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered. I thought I was finished." Ayanna smiled, brushing dust from her own clothes. "You're safe," she said softly. "The West is harsh, but help can come when you least expect it. Sometimes it arrives on 4 legs and 2 hearts, willing to fight for justice." Rusty barked happily, wagging his tail as if he understood every word. The small dog had proven once again that courage came in all sizes. Jack helped the traveler to his feet. "We can guide you to Red Rock," he said. "It's not far, and you'll be safe there. But you need to stay alert." There may be others who see travelers as easy targets. As they made their way toward town, Jack thought about the journey they had all shared. The plains were unpredictable and full of danger, but they had learned to rely on each other. Ayanna's bravery, Rusty's loyalty, and Jack's experience had allowed them to survive, and to help someone else survive too. By late afternoon, they reached the edge of Red Rock. The town looked peaceful from a distance, the wooden buildings bathed in sunlight. People moved about, tending to daily chores, unaware of the small drama that had unfolded in the valley that morning. The traveler hurried into the safety of the town, waving to thank Jack, Ayanna, and Rusty before disappearing among the streets. Jack turned to Ayanna, who looked at him with admiration. "You were incredible today," he said. "Without your courage, we couldn't have done this as smoothly." "We did it together, and Rusty, he's the real hero." He never hesitated, even when things got dangerous. Rusty barked proudly, as if accepting the praise. Jack laughed softly. "That's our little hero. He has a way of showing us what courage really means." The two of them walked back into town, feeling the satisfaction of having faced danger and prevailed. They found a quiet cabin near the edge of Red Rock, where they could rest for the night. Jack built a fire, and Rusty curled up nearby. Ayanna sat beside him, sharing a simple meal of bread and dried meat. The warmth of the fire and the calm of the evening made them feel safe, a rare comfort in the Wild West. As they ate, Jack and Ayanna spoke quietly about their journey so far. They recounted the storms, the dangerous canyon, and the bandits they had faced. Each story reminded them of how much they had learned and how much they had grown. Not just as individuals, but as a team. "I never imagined I could survive the plains like this," Ayanna admitted, her voice soft but confident. "And yet, here I am. With courage, skill, and friends, I can face almost anything."
Exactly. The West is harsh, but it teaches you resilience.
It shows you who you are and what you can do. And sometimes, it shows you the importance of trust and friendship. Rusty barked softly as if in agreement, and Jack chuckled. "Yes, little buddy. You remind us of that every day." The night passed peacefully, with only the occasional howl of a distant coyote breaking the quiet. Stars blanketed the sky, and the plains seemed endless, but for Jack, Ayanna, and Rusty, the world felt safe, if only for a moment. They knew that challenges would come again, but they also knew they could face them together. The next morning, they prepared for one final leg of their journey. Jack had heard rumors of a hidden valley farther west, a place where travelers could find shelter, water, and safety for the long term. It would be a difficult journey through hills, rivers, and stretches of open plains, but he believed it was worth the effort. Ayanna, confident in her newfound skills, was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Rusty barked excitedly, ready for the adventure. As they traveled, they encountered small obstacles. A fallen tree blocking the path, a sudden stream swollen with rainwater, and patches of dense brush. But together, they navigated each challenge with determination and teamwork. Jack guided Ayanna through each obstacle, teaching her new skills along the way. She learned to climb rocks more safely, find hidden paths, and even predict small changes in the weather. Rusty ran ahead, always alert, and often guided them to safer routes or alerted them to hidden dangers. By late afternoon, they reached the edge of a wide valley. The sun glinted off a sparkling river, trees lined the banks, and small caves offered shelter from the elements. Jack smiled, knowing that they had reached a place where they could rest and build a more permanent safety. Ayanna looked around in awe. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "A safe place." "Finally." "Yes, it is. And it's ours to protect and enjoy." "This journey has tested us, taught us courage, and shown us the value of trust. But we've made it. Together." Rusty barked joyfully, running to explore the valley, and Ayanna laughed softly, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. She realized that the Wild West, though harsh and unpredictable, had also brought her friendship, safety, and hope. As evening fell, they set up a small camp near the river, building a fire and sharing a quiet meal. The stars reflected on the water, creating a scene of calm and serenity. Jack looked at Ayanna, who smiled warmly, and Rusty wagged his tail happily. "This is the beginning of something new," Jack said. "A place to rest, a place to learn, and a place to grow stronger. And we'll face it together, no matter what comes next." Ayanna nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She had survived loss, danger, and loneliness, and now she had found companions who valued her courage and strength. Rusty, the small but fearless dog, had guided them, reminded them of the power of loyalty, and inspired them to act bravely when it mattered most. The West was vast and wild, full of unknowns and challenges, but Jack, Ayanna, and Rusty had proven that trust, courage, and friendship could overcome even the greatest obstacles. And as they sat by the fire that night, watching the stars, they knew that this journey, though finished, was only the beginning of their story together. They were no longer just a cowboy, a widow, and a dog. They were heroes of the plains, united by bravery, loyalty, and the knowledge that together they could face anything. And in the vast, wild West, that was a power stronger than any danger, greater than any fear, and more valuable than any treasure.